Big Pharma has spent more money trying to develop a drug to not only try to lengthen telomeres, but if they could just stop them from disappearing, you could literally slow down the aging process.
There's a false notion in our society. I'll take care of you if you take care of me. But the truth is, if we actually take care of ourselves first, only then can we change our life, change our homes, change our cities, our relationships, and eventually change the world. For those of you who appreciate the holistic lifestyle, you've come to the right place. Your host, Emanuel Zavallos, is a certified emotion and body code practitioner and certified group energy facilitator. You are now listening to Healing the Healer podcast.
This show is brought to you by Heal, the social media platform for those who love the holistic lifestyle. Are you tired of sharing holistic tips and getting banned or going to Facebook jail for sharing the truth? Are you tired of all the Facebook political drama? Tired of people who don't support energy healing growth? My wife Jess and I created a social media platform that was meant for people who love social media, communicating with like-minded people, and love learning hacks from other wellness practitioners. It's free to join. www.haveempathyandlove.com. Plus, every week you have the option and choice to opt into a cutting-edge healing group where you get energy healing for 7 days straight. Again, it's free to join. www.haveempathyandlove.com. Welcome to Healing the Healer podcast. This is Emanuel. So excited to introduce you to someone who is just making lots of leaps and bounds here and creating a big ripple here in St. George. And his name is Ryan Brinkerhoff. And he came down here to the studio, which I'm very excited about. And let me just give you kind of a little, if you don't mind, a little introduction about you. And then we'll just dive right in. So it says here, Ryan worked in the fuel communications industry for 20 plus years. In 2009, he suffered a major concussion and overnight lost his health. Through some innovative microscopy techniques and the grace of his creator for guidance, he was able to uncover the cause of his incurable autoimmune disorders. Today, Ryan operates on one of the largest hyperbaric facilities in the country here in St. George. And actually, I just found out in person that it is the largest hyperbaric facility. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, glad you're here. And so first of all, just kind of introduce to everyone who listens to this podcast, tell us about yourself a little bit, what's your, when you meet someone brand new, maybe they don't know about like how the hyperbaric work, what's like your 5-minute pitch or your 2-minute thing? You're like, let me just introduce you to that world.
Right. So, I mean, hyperbarics, the way it works is, it seems so simple, right? You sit inside a pressurized chamber, breathe in a lot of oxygen, and a lot of things set off in the body and take off. But kind of the way that our little one-sentence pitch that we use in the office all the time is, it is the ultimate healing vessel for the human body. So whether it is something that is, more on the physical side of things, if it's more mental, emotional, or even on the spiritual side of things, there's a piece that sets in when you're in a hyperbaric chamber that kind of creates a place for people to be vulnerable and even work through those mental things that they're trying to work on. So that's kind of where we go with it. It's like if the body's going to heal, it's going to heal inside of a hyperbaric chamber. So that's kind of where we go with it.
That's great. I was going to ask you too, because when you sent me your bio, it said something like that you got into some sort of accident, and so I'm always just curious, but I wanted to wait for the podcast to ask you, like, what happened to you exactly? Because I was imagining like car accident or so. So what happened to you? And it obviously led you to this, and
right.
I always have this theory where it's just like, father passes away in a fire, you become a fireman, or it's like your mission is involved in a tragedy in some
right.
ways. So how is that for you? Like, what happened to you?
Yeah, so it was nothing, cool. There was no cool stories. It was just I got up one night and went to use the bathroom. And then the next thing I knew, the next like 2 or 3 hours were kind of just like shutter frames for me because I was coming to a little bit in consciousness and then I black out again. And what had happened is right before I went out of my door to my room to go to the restroom, I blacked out and I fell backwards and I hit the back of my skull on my big oak desk I have right there.
Oh, man.
So not only did it cause a major concussion, I lost a ton of blood. So needless to say, by the time that I finally came to where I was really conscious, there was blood. It looked like a murder scene in my house, because I guess what I was doing is I would pass out, and then I would, gather my senses, and I'd stand up and I'd try to figure out what was going on with me, wobble around a little bit, and then I'd fall again. So it literally looked like a murder scene. Wow. Like my little brother was home at the time, and he was trying to help me and everything like that. And then my grandma was staying with us at the time, and she thought somebody had attacked me because of how much blood, and it was just a mess, man. It was a mess. And it was, about 12, 14 hours later, got the wound on the back of my head fixed up, everything cleaned up. And then just this cascade of symptoms just started rushing in that literally took over my life for the next couple of years. So the concussion was the catalyst that basically took pretty much everything away from me that I'd ever worked for, everything I'd attained in the fuel industry, and everything that I'd become myself was just kind of swept away from me in just that one major fall. So
was it who introduced you to that type of therapy? That
the hyperbarics?
Yeah, like so how did that come into your life? Because were you seeking for other things and then you finally hit that, or was it the first thing you found? Or?
Oh yeah, no, it definitely wasn't the first thing. So for about 3 or 4 years, because I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome within a week of this happening. I mean, my body was just so inflamed and everything. Yeah, I mean, the chiropractor that we used to go see, he'd put his hands on my back, and he's like, you feel like you have a sunburn, because there was so much inflammation through this area. Started having grand mal seizures all the time, and then the symptoms progressed to where I started getting peripheral numbness everywhere. There was a name for it, some type of dementia, where I would be in a conversation like this, and then all of a sudden it was just like literally somebody turned the switch off to my brain. And if I was somewhere where I didn't recognize everybody with me or recognize where I was at, when I would come to, I would have no idea why I was there, and I would panic and just have to get away. I just have to go. And then it was probably about 8 months after that, then I started having symptoms of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And that was my tongue started quivering in my mouth. And about 10 years prior, I had lost 2 of my uncles who were like best friends to me. They were more like big brothers to me. They both died of ALS. So here I was at, how old was I then? I was 32, 33, something like that. I had a 4-year-old daughter, and my son was about 18 months old, and with a non-existent mother, and I'm staring at this reality of, I'm going to go down this exact same road that I watched destroy my 2 uncles' family. Right. It was a really dark time. But hyperbarics came. I finally got in a hyperbaric chamber around 2015. I'd gone through a lot of my recovery. I regained about 70% of myself back, and then I just hit this plateau that no matter what I did, I couldn't go above that. And the gentleman that's my business partner now had bought a hyperbaric chamber, and I said, dude, can I try that? Maybe once. And I got in there, and when I got out, not only did I feel like better than where I was, before that concussion, but I'd never felt like that in my whole entire life.
Oh, so you got even better, like beyond rejuvenated.
Yes. Yeah, it was something else. I went to that place that I didn't think really exist when people used to tell me in the past, like, yeah, nothing hurts in my body. I have unlimited energy all day long and stuff like that. I'd just be like, sure you do.
Yeah.
Just making stuff
kind of fibbing a little bit.
Right. But that's where I was.
Yeah.
And then so after that, it was, I'd already been into the microscopy, found out actually that I had these stealth infections inside of me. And what we think happened, why I went downhill so quick, when you get a concussion, it will disable your immune system for X amount of time. I had 3 or 4 different infections in me through ticks. They come through ticks, Lyme's disease, Bartonella, anaplasmosis, stuff like that. And it took them from kind of on surface level stuff where I had sore knees, maybe some muscle pain, some brain fog. And when the immune system turned off, it allowed them to get into my central nervous system.
Got it.
So, overnight, literally developing 4 or 5 sets of symptoms that could be tagged on any one of these autoimmune disorders. And my life went to nothing, like, very, very quickly. Right.
It almost sounded like it's just kind of weird that like different types of symptoms started showing up back to back to back. Like I've heard people kind of deal with one symptom, maybe ALS, but not the other ones, and pathogens don't get involved, but it sounds like, in my opinion, I always feel like there is a silver lining to people's journey, so for example, like, the fact that you can get out of multiple symptoms and come out even better than you were before should be a testimonial to other people to say that if you have any of these symptoms, I had 4 times that and I still got out. And so I can see why you're so passionate about it. So
it was just such a catalyst in not only bringing me back to where I was, but then thrusting me into this area where I didn't think you could actually get that really existed.
Right.
And so after that, it was just sit down, start formulating on how we can make a business out of this and how we can make it work. And I did a couple other like small case studies with different people suffering from different things before I made that leap. Because I used to make a ton of money in fuel communications, but this was the reason why this all happened to me is because this is where I needed to be.
Right.
And I wasn't listening. And so the universe went, okay, well, you're not going to listen. Now I'm going to make you listen. And everything was taken. So.
Yeah, and that's why when you sent me your bio, I love the fact that it said here, you didn't have to put it in there, but you said, "In the grace of the Creator for guidance."
Yeah.
And so obviously that you were guided. Mm-hmm. So that's great, and thank you for sharing that. I was just kind of curious to see, like, what happened. In my mind, I was picturing some crazy car ride, and I
wish it was really cool.
Yeah,
like that,
no, but still, hey, like being in your house and getting a concussion and having blood everywhere, that is a pretty tragic situation. I mean, that's like, very scary.
Dude, I lost a ton of blood, and it was everywhere, all over the house, and I couldn't figure out what was happening. But like, especially in the bathtub, I remember I came to and I got a big mirror in there, and I remember one of the little shutter memories that I had before I blacked out again. I was standing there staring at myself in the mirror, and from the top of my head all the way down as far as I could see, I was just covered in blood because I was bleeding so much, and then falling into the bathtub and trying to catch myself and then getting back up and falling into something else. And so it was a grim scene, man.
Yeah, that's crazy. So something that I heard from I think it was for your office manager. She was telling me that you were doing some pro bono work, or you were helping out some people. And I got really excited because I'm not sure if you follow me in regards to like what I've done pro bono wise, but when I first got started my emotion code body code practice back in 2015, I graduated from military school when I was 17, like a JROTC, so I was in, they send good kids to military school, by the way. So don't be,
I'm not looking into that too
much. Don't
much.
be judging me right now. But aged of 14 to 17, I went to military school, became the highest ranking officer there. So I took it very seriously, broke like a 90-year record in the school. Wow. I mean, so I was very close friends with all the people that went to like Vietnam. And those are the people that were kind of like helping me out and making me a leader, because I was a 0.2 GPA guy for 14 years, and so I was like, these people are amazing, they're my heroes. But then as years went on, they started having these symptoms of like PTSD. And so I started looking into the emotion code, and I kind of found out somehow through the grapevine that Dr. Brad was like sending out emotion code books to Iraq. And he was thinking that he was kind of doing the math at like 100 out of this many people go to Iraq, about 100,000 will come back with PTSD. So he was like giving away free books to them so that they can use it for themselves. So I said, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, I'm going to provide 6 sessions or 12 sessions to help them out. And I'm looking for veterans with PTSD. And that's how I started my practice. Like as soon as it started, I started like this kind of giving away to these people. Because to be honest, like I said, they fight for our country. They give us all these freedoms. They help us with these freedoms, and they don't get treated well when they come back. And the VA doesn't really look out for them. And so when I heard that you do something for these veterans, like if you can share with the listeners, like what are you doing right now? Because I know people that would probably travel to you and to see you. And then I'll tell you something that may even help that out. So if you want to share.
Yeah. So one of my first patients I had come in when we opened up our hyperbaric facility was this veteran. He is type 2 diabetic, all these other things. And I was talking to him about all the symptoms. Very complex case, right? So you've got all these physiological things wrong inside the body. And then on top of it, all this mental and emotional stuff, So I'm thinking, this guy's probably had tons of blood workups, they're looking at all sorts of things, tons of imagery. And he's like, I've got some stuff at home that they've checked me for. And I'm like, God, bring it in. Let's take a look, see if
Right.
something got overlooked. And he brings in his blood work, and I'm looking at it, and it's the same type of blood work like if you were a 12-year-old girl trying out for a soccer team and you need a physical done.
Yeah.
That's what they're running on these veterans. And I'm like, this is such a complex case. I mean, they should be running some of the most advanced blood work on this guy that's given up so much of him so we can lay our heads on these pillows at night, right, and sleep and know that we're free and that nobody's going to attack us.
Exactly.
This is the blood work they're going to run on these people? And so I reached out to my buddy that was in the military. I'm like, dude, send me some of your blood work, because he was struggling with the same type of stuff. Went to Operation Iraqi Freedom, came back, completely different person, and same thing. It seemed like the only thing they were concerned with was to make sure that the levels of the antipsychotic, the SSRI drugs, the ADHD drugs, that those levels were right inside their blood, and then they didn't take it any farther than that. And it was appalling to me, really. And so I said, you know what? I called up my friend who was a professor at Dixie State University and said, I'm going to run a little case study here. Do you have any veterans in your class right now? And she's like, yeah, we have one. And I'm like, would he be interested in doing hyperbarics? And she's like, I don't know if he'd be interested, but he needs to come. And I'm
Right.
like, all right, well, what's the story? And she's like, well, he comes into class every day, and his face is this nice little shade of either red or purple, so we know how pissed off he is based on the color of his face every day. And most of the time he gets mad, leaves the class, storms out, whatever. And so I'm like, I'd love to have him come over. Send him my way. So he comes in, and at first he's very open and everything like that, and then something happened, and you can see the shades coming into the face, and you can tell he's really struggling to control his anger
emotions.
at that point.
Yeah, his anger,
he's
yeah.
ready to freak out.
Yeah.
And so I said, you know what? Let me make a deal with you. I will give you 40 hyperbaric sessions. But as we're going through those, I would like you to keep a journal and just let me know how you're doing.
Sure.
Just on the day-to-day before you go to bed, if you notice anything better, anything worse, if you could jot it all down, and then please communicate with me openly if there's anything else we can do. Well, needless to say, I think he went through about 120 sessions. 2 years later, he graduated with a double master's from Dixie State University. And then he moved back to Washington, D.C., now where he just lobbies around the clock for veterans to be able to have access to these hyperbaric chambers that are on most of these military bases.
Wow.
His sleeping problems, his emotional problems, his physical pain problems, they're all gone, and they've never come back.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And after that, it was like, okay, well, if the VA is not going to step up and take care of this with taxpayer money, we're going to create a nonprofit, and we're going to bring one veteran at a time, because it costs between like $12,000 and $15,000 in hyperbaric sessions to get these people to a place where we feel like they're
doing better.
We've done as much as we can, right? Yeah. And we just run them through a battery of hyperbaric sessions, and then you can just sit and watch the changes happen. I mean, you see. It's unbelievable. Then you usually get the wife or the family members coming in and thanking us and everything like that. And then it's not something that when the hyperbaric sessions are over that they revert back. No, this is like cellular healing that happens with these people. And does it fix everything for them? No. But, like Mr. Josh Rock, we've got his testimonial video on our page, InsideOutHyperbarics.com. You can listen to him tell his own story, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's first of all, that's a fantastic story, because like I said, people, and there's plenty of people like him that the only reason why they haven't gone to you, in my opinion, is because they just don't know you exist. Yeah. Really, what it is, and the reality is I think the thing that's working for us though, and the most, and tell me if you agree or not, but like I feel that the baby boomers that were promised to get better due to certain medications are not happy with the results, and now are getting multiple symptoms that they didn't expect they would ever get. Right. And now they're going back and going like, hey, this isn't working. I'm going on this carousel of different symptoms when all I was trying to deal with was just this one symptom. Right. And people are just like sick and tired of the Band-Aid, So that's kind of working for us in our favor, because I feel like a lot of people wouldn't be open-minded unless they were sick and tired of being sick and tired. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's exactly what it was. And with not only with these veterans, but with COVID recently, right? Like COVID put a lot of businesses in a lot of bad places. And a lot of people lost their businesses because of it. But my business began to thrive because They looked at the vaccines, they looked at everything that was going on, and they went, well, this stuff over here isn't working, what they're suggesting. Maybe I need to start taking better care of myself.
Right.
And the last 2 years, I cannot tell you how many people not only coming in, but calls from all over the country. Hey, I've got kids, I've got this. What are the things on a daily basis that I can do to boost everybody's immune system up to make sure we're as healthy as we can possibly be in case this virus goes around again?
Right. And I'm glad you made that point about the immune system, because I always kind of joke around with people saying that, so we're smart enough for cars for us to put some type of tune-up system where something goes yellow and we know they have to change it. Mm-hmm. But somehow God forgot to like put something on us to say, hey, this needs to be changed. It's like something that can't regulate itself somehow. Right. And he forgot to put in the immune system that's supposed to help us out. Mm-hmm. And I also feel like a lot of the things in the past, I'm trying to remember, like sort of like the tribal cultures in the past that already found things in nature, and it's just a lot of people are very ignorant of the fact that when you're talking about energy medicine or the type of work you do, they've probably did forms of that in the past, but it's coming back around again. It's not like something new. It's not like a new age thing. It's just some things that worked before were kind of buried due to big pharma pushing them down in the ground. And then now it's finally like rearing its head saying, this actually worked before for your great grandfather.
Right.
And so, but yeah, I'm excited because, I used to recommend my clients to Hyperbaric, and I said, look, I'm doing free sessions for you, but and I always was looking for a place in Vegas that they can go in and get free services. Mm-hmm. And luckily I did find one. I said, it's, and then I told them to go there and be consistent with it every single month. And I'm very big on the journal too, because again, we tend to overlook things all the time because we just get so busy with life. Right. If you're not keeping a journal on your improvement of your holistic style, you're not really taking your growth seriously. Right. And so, I'm glad you're sharing that. I was going to ask you too, what has been what is an ideal person to come into the Hyperbaric? Because I know there's probably already some people thinking in their mind, they're like, okay, so I have to fall down and bleed in a room, or I have to be shell shocked as a veteran. It's like, what type of person, what type of citizen would be like, hey, I should probably look into this because I'm dealing with these symptoms and I really haven't seen much results. Like what's your ideal client look like?
It's really anybody who is wanting to take their health and their vitality to a different level. So I get everything from super elite athletes that come in and use the hyperbarics for the recovery aspect and for the boost of performance before they go out on, whatever their deal is. Right. And then I get stage 4 cancer patients. I get ALS. I get Parkinson's. And so that question is, we see such
wide
a
range
of people. Right. So it's kind of, if your health is here right. and you want it to be here, right, we can help facilitate the body to go there. Now, is it a fix-all for everything? No. Mm-hmm. Is it going to work like it should if as soon as you get out of the hyperbaric chamber, you run to McDonald's, get a number 4, and supersize it? Right. No. But if people are really, really looking for a vessel to jumpstart and spark that path to wherever they want to go in their health, it will help. In medicine, they never look at the blood while it's alive. You never look at how the white blood cells, the immune system is interacting with its environment. You never look at anything like that. You just, you got the right amount of white blood cells, so your immune system's good. Well, if somebody's had mold exposure, you run a CBC, you've got the right amount of white blood cells, right? But if you look at them live under a microscope, they're completely disabled.
Right. What they're doing, it's like
they're doing nothing.
They're doing nothing, right? Yeah.
As a matter of fact, if you go get an immunosuppressive drug, say you get a transplant of an organ, and they don't want your immune system to attack that new organ, they're going to give you a pill that's just basically filled with either, aspergillosis, Stachys, or sometimes penicillium, the toxins these molds produce, and it shuts your immune system off. So even on clinical paper, they're like, oh yeah, your immune system's great. You look at it live under a microscope and you go, yeah, your whole army's here. They're not moving. They're not doing anything. It's completely shut down. Right. And so, so that I do that one day a week. And I got doctors that send their patients to me from all over the country for this unique look inside the body. But when I was really sick and the ALS was looming over my head, that's what I did to find this certain bacteria I could see floating around in my blood, and I knew it wasn't supposed to be there. And that's what kind of propelled me forward to keep searching, keep looking. You're going to figure this out. You're going to get better.
I think it's also surprising too that like when I started researching pathogens and things like that, 70 to 80% of people in America have some form of parasites, and it's like more common than we think.
Right.
And then, and also on the energy side, energy healing side, I've noticed you can also absorb pathogens from people energetically, not even physically, or you can pass it down inherited energy wise. So it's like, you have to look, there's things also too that you can't see in a microscope,
right,
that doctors wouldn't even look at. Like, why would you look at an inherited prion from 3 generations above? They wouldn't even look, you can't even see it, you know, but it's still somehow giving the symptoms as if you had physical prions in the body.
Like a generational trauma that is just being passed
down. Yeah. So
absolutely. And so on that note, you know, there's one that they claim up to probably 80 to 90% of people living on this planet have an infection with. It's called Toxoplasmosis gondii. Comes from cat feces, and it's the reason why if a woman's pregnant, they'll tell them, don't ever change the litter, right?
Right.
Well, the way this parasite reproduces in the natural world is by controlling the brain of rodents. Literally takes over their brain and makes them, their host, do exactly what they want so they can complete their life cycle. And
that's very Cujo, Stephen King, scary stuff.
Dude, it's
but that can also transfer to humans as well.
Well, they're saying that, you know, 8 to 9 out of 10 people have this infection in them, and there's only been a few studies done to see how it affects us. And in the last big study that I read about this specific parasite, it makes men thrill seekers. So, you know, jumping out of planes, rock climbing, going fast, whatever. But on the women's side of things, it makes them very promiscuous. And now when you hear that, you go, well, why would it do that to a female unless it's trying to pass itself
to other
sexually
hosts? Okay, so it'd be sexually transmitted.
Somebody else.
See, that makes a lot of sense.
That's how it usually works with parasites.
Right. And I wonder why the men become so aggressive with adrenaline, because then you'd be killing him off.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know. I don't know that side of it.
That's a weird paradox. The man would die in a snowboarding accident. I don't know how that would pass the parasite on. But.
And maybe something with, you know, the dopamine rush or whatever. It might change the brain chemicals that the only way they can, you know, feel good or feel happy is if they're pushing the limits to everything. I don't know how that would benefit the parasite, but...
Right.
When I read that the women become promiscuous, it's like, oh, okay, we're an accidental host for this parasite, but is it figured out a way to use us the same way it uses rodents to propagate?
Right. I'm trying to, it reminded me what you just said was Joe Rogan. You mentioned Joe Rogan before we even got on this podcast, that he showed like a fish. I don't know if you saw this picture, and the parasite took over this fish and
ate its tongue?
Ate its tongue.
Mm-hmm. That's
very disturbing. That was the most disturbing. That's will give me nightmares. I need emotion code, body code work on me right now.
Yeah.
Just the thought of that photo.
When they open up their mouth, you see the other little mouth sitting there, so they can eat everything.
Everything is very disturbing. Mm-hmm. That's the most disturbing thing. And I think Joe Rogan would say it's like, what is like nature is so like there's some things in nature that are just beyond my comprehension of like telestial lower level stuff. Like for this thing to take over a fish by the tongue, you know, for certain monkeys to treat other monkeys the way it does, there's certain things that are very low level, almost cannibalistic things, but it is really interesting.
Yeah, and that parasite right there, that's basically child's play in the grand scheme of especially like the brain controlling parasites like Toxo that we just talked about.
Yeah.
If you get on YouTube and you type in, you know, rodent attacking cat, you know, all the comments will be, oh my gosh, look how brave this this mouse is trying to attack these cats. And it's like, no, this parasite can only reproduce if it goes through the stomach of a feline. So this rodent will still be scared of humans, dogs, every other predator. But the parasite goes in and rewires the rodent's brain to make the smell of cat urine absolutely intoxicating to these brain-infected felines.
Wow.
So if they're going along and they smell that there's a cat around, if they're infected with this, they will go and bite, claw, whatever, until that cat eats that rodent. Once it hits the stomach, the parasite ruptures out of the stomach, breeds inside of the cat's stomach, and then the cat craps out all the brand new parasites on the ground. Mouse comes along, eats the dropping, gets its brain infected. Cycle continues.
See, we're letting everyone know. See, once you become healed by the hyperbaric, you start thinking about the craziest things. On our free time, we talk about the scariest parasites. No, that is interesting stuff. I'm always interested, like how nature works and things like that. I have a couple more questions for you, and I wrote these down earlier. Who, in your mind right now, is your biggest influence in life that kind of makes you continue doing your mission of what you're doing? Because, and I also want to ask you this: is it your mission, or do you feel like perhaps it's a stepping stool for your ultimate mission?
You know what? I always knew since I was young, that I wanted to be a doctor. Was kind of the thing, right? I always knew it was in me. I always was so fascinated by everything that was going on inside the body. But in high school, I let teachers and stuff talk me out of it because I had really bad ADHD. My grades weren't bad. I mean, like a 3.5 or something like that, but they weren't what they told me I needed to have them to be a doctor. And so I let that influence kind of push me out of that field. But I think that's why the concussion and everything happened to me. It's because there was always these little, reminders. Hey, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be doing this with your time. There's something else you're supposed to be doing. So in the fuel industry, even though I was making oodles of money, I was walking around pretty much in quiet desperation all the time. I had everything I thought I ever wanted as far as material possessions, but every morning I woke up and I felt dead inside.
Empty.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And basically, I had beautiful kids. I mean, everybody thought I had the world, by the tail. And there was always these reminders, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then finally, and this is just my opinion, but the universe said, okay, you're not going to listen to me. I'm going to take everything away from you, and you'll have to listen to me. And that's why I think all that happened to me.
I mean, there's certain, I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's certain rock bottom moments that I guess that they say that failure or rock bottom moments are sort of the foundation of like an amazing tree or an amazing plant that's going to come out of it, which is, what your next mission is going to be. And I always feel like, I tell people all the time the Napoleon Hill quote, which is, in every adversity, there's an equal or greater benefit. Right. That's him interviewing 500 of the most successful people in the world. I think they know what they're talking about, but it seems like we tend to focus at the door that's closing. We forget the doors that are opening behind us. Mm-hmm. And if we just look back and just see there's something waiting for you. I think in your case, the door was closing on your health and in your business that you had before, but there was a new door of like, this is what your calling is.
Right.
And I think if everyone realized that your calling sometimes will have to have harsh doors closed on you, I think this world would have more people not being so insecure with their creativity.
Right, and it's kind of that thing where it's like, one of my favorite phrases is, instead of looking at it, why is this happening to me? You change that sentence around a little bit and go, why is this happening for me?
Right.
Because then you start looking at it completely different. Because it got to a point where, and this is what I've told my closest friends and stuff like that, I got so bad it felt like I was standing at the bottom of a 100-foot well, and the only place I had to go down was another 6 feet. But in that darkest part of my life, there was this beautiful moment of comfort where my ego disappeared, and I'm laughing like I'm probably lost my mind, right? But at that point, all the fear of everything in life kind of disappeared for me. And I went, well, other people have done this, why can't I do this? And then at that point, it's the first couple times it happened, you're like, oh, what an amazing coincidence. As a matter of fact, I'm standing in line one day at Harmon's, and I'd just been talking with my friend who's a doctor, and he's like, well, we need to get into your genetics. Do you know any geneticists that are really good? And this was in like 2012, 13, where you couldn't go get a 23andMe or anything like that. And I'm standing there in line, and all of a sudden I look over, and I'm like, is that so-and-so? A world-renowned geneticist standing right in front of me in Harmon's. And I, don't want to be a creep or anything. I'm like, excuse me, are you? And he's like, yeah. How'd you know? And I'm like, oh, I've read a bunch of your papers online and everything like that. And I'm like, can I ask you a couple questions? Opened all these doors, helped me through that next step. Then the next time it happened was somebody else in the medical field. And after a couple times, you're like, okay, the odds of that person being right in front of me in line. Yeah. 1 in a few million. Happening with somebody else, you're talking about billions or trillions, right? So at that point, you start surrendering to it. And it really changed the way during my meditation and my prayers at night where I used to, and it's so ridiculous. Like, the way I was raised, LDS, you were telling the Lord, like, what you wanted.
Right.
And then I started looking at that. I'm like, dude, you think I know what's better for me than somebody that created everything?
Sure.
And so I took that, those moments in, when I was connected to my higher self, and I just started asking, will you please humble me to let me see why I'm here? I'm not going to tell you anymore what I want. What I want is to be humble enough to have my eyes open to the realities of what my purpose is here. And when I started doing that at night, everything changed. Everything changed.
Yeah, that's really powerful, by the way. Similar to like, the only thing I can relate to you in that way is that, first of all, with the coincidence of the 1 out of a million, I always say that there's that phrase where it says, coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous. And what's interesting is that I feel that you went from selfish to being selfless. Mm-hmm. I think that's the ultimate change of the person who wants to embody the Creator, is just change from selfishness to selflessness. And I remember the one promise that I made, the more joy that I have, let's say if I do go to church, when I do go to church, I go, I'm not here to, like, what can I get from church? Mm-hmm. I always say, what can I give in church? And it's a very, very different experience when you go, because you're going there saying, like, let me be a tool for you. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like my middle name's Francis, so I have to, St. Francis of Assisi said, let me be an instrument of thy peace. Mm-hmm. And that for me is the St. Francis prayer is the most selfless prayer I've ever read. Yeah. And it's like, why don't we pray like that? We should pray like, let me be an instrument of your peace. Like, let me get out of the way. And if I get out of my way, you'll bring me to a higher joy than I've ever had. So right. I totally agree with you. 100%. Yeah.
See, because I was always running into that paradigm, like where, the way I was raised, on a horse racing ranch, and, you're up really early to clean stalls, and you learn how to work really hard, right? And then you also get taught those values of goal setting and everything else along that way. But when I started changing the way I was communicating, I went from, where I'm telling you where I'm going, so you need to listen and pave this path for me. Right. To, okay, well, I'm going to go whatever path you tell me to, right. But please open my eyes to the things that I need to see and experience along this path, right. So I make sure I do it right. Right. And so I had to undo a lot of programming. Because he can't
kind of like force the eyeball to do that. So it's your will that you have to do that, and it is our lack of humility. It's the ego, basically. Yeah. It's the battle with the ego.
Yeah, so it kind of took away that goal setting, which in a way where I'm like, okay, this month I'm going to be here, and then I'm going to be there, because this is where I'm going to. Right. Okay, I don't really know what's in store for me this next month. I'm going to still go work as hard as I can to provide value in people's lives, but please just let me see every situation for exactly how I need to see it, right, to provide value to these people along my journey.
And more value to people you don't even know in the future. Yeah. Like somehow you attracted some really handsome Peruvian guy to give you a call and say, hey, be on this pot.
I have no idea how that still happened, man. I was just like...
Case closed.
Yeah, I was like, wow, my blessings today, right?
I had to throw myself in there just to kind of just top off the cherry on there. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about if someone were to come to St. George, because I feel like this is, people are saying this is like the second Sedona, it's like, it's like a wellness center retreat part 2. I think it might be part 1. It's growing pretty quickly. Technically, if we're growing in the speed that we're growing at and just more holistic people come here, will be sort of Sedona will be number 2, in my opinion. But I was going to ask you, if someone were to come for the weekend and be like, I want to experience, what your services have to offer, what would be like a cool... Is there like a regimen, like a come for 2 days, I would try to do this, this, and this, and then you can go back home and that would be like a very powerful experience. What does that look like for someone who wants to really just not tiptoe in? They want to like I'm going to use the word dive because that's the word that you would use, right? You dive in.
We do have that happen where people are wanting to buy hyperbaric chambers for their own home, right? And we sell them all over the world. And so what that would look like is they would come in, we do hyperbarics first thing in the morning, and then directly from the hyperbaric chamber into our full spectrum infrared sauna with light therapy, because the hyperbarics just amplifies the power of the sauna. And then usually people get out of that sauna and they're just like, wow, I never want to not feel like this ever again.
Right.
And then we usually have about an 8-hour gap in between the first hyperbaric and then the hyperbaric at the end of the day, and just really show them going out of that sympathetic overdrive. This is one of the beauties of hyperbarics. It pulls you out of that fight or flight, I got to get everything done, go a million miles an hour, and boost that parasympathetic way up. And they actually bridge about 10 minutes, they balance out 10 minutes after you started your hyperbaric session. And there's only 2 times in normal human life that this will happen. And the first time is when a human is meditating. And the second time is right after a woman gives birth and she gets hit with that giant dump of oxytocin.
Right.
Then those nervous systems balance out.
Which you can't really request that every single month if you're a woman. So you get to find some other way to do it.
Yeah, and it's a very powerful way to do it. So what we try to do is not only have them come in and use our services, but most of my staff that works for me are old clients or patients of ours. And when people walk through our door, the last thing I ever want my facility to feel like is a medical facility.
Right.
We don't do that. When people walk through that door...
And what do you mean by that? Medical, so... Like almost like stale walls, cold shoulders. Like what are you talking about?
It's that, and then it's also that when that patient, once they fill out that paperwork, and this is how I've always kind of felt how I was treated, I wasn't Ryan Brinkerhoff anymore. I was whatever the symptoms or the diseases that I've been diagnosed with, that's what I was to that doctor. That's the last thing I ever want happen at my facility, because every person that comes through that door, and whether it's, a really elite athlete or somebody who's on their last leg, this is a human being with hopes, dreams, the soul, and they just want to feel like somebody actually gives a shit about them.
Absolutely.
That they're not this disease, they're not this symptom. This is so-and-so who has 3 kids this age, that has this wife that had a business that he ended up losing.
Yeah. It's you.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah, I know where you get that customer service is because it's that longing, that yearning that you wanted and you never got it.
Yeah. So basically, the whole premise after I got sick and then started to get better and why I left the fuel industry, I knew I'd probably never make money like I used to make, right? But when at every step during my recovery back to health, it seemed like people were just where I needed to bump into them at that specific time. They were just there. Those chess pieces were moving as I needed them. And so when I finally walked out of that dark cave of chronic illness into this level of health I'd really never known, the urge to turn around, light the torch, and go back into that dark cave and wave it over my head for everybody else that was wandering around in that same cave was so overwhelming that I had to do that. And I've done that ever since, because I wasn't given all these unbelievable minds to help me along my way just for me to go back and work on military grade encryption systems at gas stations.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
No,
right.
It was for this bigger picture. Right. And so when those folks come through that door, we want them to feel like, okay, I know you're here. You're Parkinson's disease, late stage, whatever it is, but tell me about your family. Tell me what you used to do, and what would your world look like in a month from now? Where would you go if you could get out of that wheelchair and walk yourself? What would that look like? Because we don't want people to focus on symptom disease.
Right.
Yeah, it's there. It's a real thing.
Right.
But I want you to start thinking in your brain and manifesting. If you could get up out of that wheelchair, 60, 90, 120 days from today, what would that first walk be like? Where would you go?
I think, first of all, I think it's a fantastic way to invite people into your world. And really what it is, it kind of duplicates the Missouri Emoto kind of effect, like with the whole...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with like words and how they can get imprinted on water crystals. I mean, we're 80% water. Mm-hmm. And the reality is I always tell people this, like when you get... This is, I guess, some example of it. When you get bullied, I always tell people, I'm not worried. The trauma you created when you got bullied is one thing, but how you bully yourself post-bullying can damage your body, your mind, your spirit afterwards more than the actual physical bullying. So if you get symptoms from a doctor says there's no hope there, I tell them that probably lit your body half on fire. The other half you did yourself because you felt hopelessness, lost, scared, fear, and like you're saying, your sympathetic, parasympathetics are going off because you're in fight or flight now, trying to figure out how to live. And it's almost you're trying to tell them like, hey, like let's just leave your symptoms on the table. Yeah. That's not who you are.
Right.
You're an actual person, you know, you're a daughter or son of the creator, and I honor you, like namaste, right? And then that's, once you honor that, then they can get back to honoring themselves again.
Right. Yeah. And that's spot on. And so looking at, you know, I've been looking at people's blood since 2009, you know, did some stuff over at Dixie State University with one of my mentors over there in infectious disease studies. But the thing that you would see that really made me realize that we are definitely an emotional living being having a physical experience on this earth is I've looked at people's blood who have been in car accidents. They're in comas, right? I mean, people that have been bit by rattlesnakes to see the damage done to these cells. Anything you can think of other than radiation exposure on the human cells physically, right? Mm-hmm. You'll never see more damage done to human cells than somebody who's going through a major emotional life event.
Right.
Somebody that has lost a child, somebody who's going through a divorce. You will see more physical damage at our base cellular level than somebody who's just got in a major car accident that's been in a coma for 2 months. Mm-hmm. We are very, very cerebral. We're very spiritual.
Right.
And we're very emotional.
Yeah, and I always kind of talk about how there's a saying where it says that, you know, we're created for success but programmed for failure. And what's interesting is I feel like the reason why we're programmed by failure is because we don't have any systems in our childhood that teach us that we're emotional, physical, spiritual beings. Right. If we did have emotion 101 at 4th grade, we would probably be more careful in how we express ourselves and how we react to things. Right. So that way later on in the future, we don't have all of a sudden flare. They don't come out of nowhere. Right. It's your literal body signaling to you something's wrong, but you might have done that long time ago. Yeah. And you didn't take care of it, so now we're giving you pain because you won't listen.
Yeah. It's like that trauma you've got, you know, that happened to you when you were 6 years old and your little brain doesn't know how to understand it, right? You just, I must be bad, so this is why this happened to me. Right. And you bury it inside your brain and you know, put some, you know, soil over it, plant some flowers on it. But every day it's leaching down through our system. And then at some point, that thing is going to rear its ugly head, and it's going to annihilate you worse than any other physical malady that you could have. And so I'm 100% with you, man.
It's the unattended, like the thing that's unattended and ignored and put underneath the carpet that will come out at some point, unless you pay attention to it. I'm just really interested in what you do. I was also going to tell you that, and some of the listeners know about this or not, but so I've been certified in motion code, body code for over 8 years now. I took in like 100 clients a week for 8 years, just in the trenches, you know, because I love what I did. You can call me a workaholic, but really what it is when you love what you do, time doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
It's really irrelevant at that point. So then I'm out there just talking to as many people as I can, helping people, because when you find gold, your mission is to help everyone find gold themselves. Otherwise, you know, you're gonna die in a tent by yourself. You know? So I went out there to help people out. And when I was doing these PTSD, assisting people with PTSD symptoms, I could only do one person at a time. And then I would finish with them and then I would work on somebody else, which is very limited. Mm-hmm. And now recently in January this year, I got certified in a group energy facilitator. So now I'm working with between 50 to 60 people all at the same time, using multiple modalities on different themes every single week. And so one time I did work on, right now we're working on offense energies that you've absorbed from narcissists to get you back to your true loving self the way you used to be. Because people have parents that were narcissists, they've had ex-girlfriends, ex-boyfriends that are narcissists, and trust me, they are not the same person they were, this open flower willing to give love and things like that.
So you have to close yourself off to the world because there's no logic to why it all happened. There's nothing. You just were taken and abused and used and left left behind. When you had nothing left to give, then they move on to the next person that can stoke and take care of their ego like they need it.
Yeah, and then they've even had terms like, narcissists need their feed, like they feed on people. And so, but then if you are the food and you run out, there's nothing there.
Yeah, once you're done, they'll just toss you away and, create this storm to blame everything on you as you're laying there dying, and then they'll just get the next victim and run right through them.
So what I did is I created a pro bono work for PTSD veterans where I work on them Monday through Thursday at no cost. All they have to do is send me some form of proof that they have PTSD. Yeah. And then we put them in a room Monday through Thursday, and they receive a healing from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And it's just all different forms of modalities. And we send them Cepheid frequencies from my wife owns an AO scan, so she sends frequencies to them as well. And so it's like we call it multi-layered healing,
Right.
And so hopefully maybe one of these days, if there's any veteran that comes to you and says, I need help, just know that we would offer them free services too.
We always have one veteran we're taking care of, and the one that we're using right now, I know he could have used this. So
yeah. So, okay. So here's another question here too. So what is your favorite testimonial? Because you probably have a ton. I know you, because I know you've been there for a while. What, 2016 you said? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's your favorite testimonial for work? Because I noticed in your bio, in your quotations, I love how you did quote unquote curable. Mm-hmm. Whenever I see that, it reminds me of this like really monotone doctor saying, well, the way this looks is whatever he says after that is, and I'm not trying to blame the doctor, because I don't know if you know this, but my mother and father are both oncologists and hematologists, but my mother was the smarter one, because she said that Eastern and Western medicine should be combined, and that there's a reason for both. Right. But she got crucified working with clients at home after she went from Kaiser back home, and she was helping out patients, and her patients for some reason got better, and it's because she looked at their pH levels, like their diet, what's their stress at home. And so if she doesn't look at that stuff, she says they will relapse and they will get cancer again. So she was just ahead of her time, and no one appreciated her for it, because all the doctors are methodical and,
you're doing something different. Well, that's not written in the rule book.
Exactly.
We don't care if anybody got better. You should not be doing that.
Yeah. And what really actually hurt my mother big time was, she went down, there was this company called Immunophotonics, and she believed that immunotherapy was like the future to helping cancer cells kind of like go away. And they didn't allow clinical trials in the USA. So she'd go down to Peru and fly down there and find these really poor people who had no money and had stage 3 cancer. Because down there, I don't know if it was stage 4, because from stage 1 to stage 3, you can't do clinical trials on them because they have to exhaust their funds. Again, it's like mafia down there, And she started telling doctors like, hey, can you help me out? And her doctor's like, why would I help you out to do these clinical trials? And he's like, because this is what we came into the medical field to do. She's like, yeah, but then my paycheck's going to get cut in half, because all we do is provide chemotherapy. Nothing broke my mother's heart than hearing her colleagues say they came in for money and not for the love to help people. Yeah. And it's just, it's people like you that I highly respect, that you're telling me kind of where your heart is. Mm-hmm. I don't care how flashy you are, how much money you have. If you tell me you have a heart and you want to give to people, what can I do to support you? Right. Like, I'm all about it. But I was going to ask you, what is your favorite testimonial from work? Because I bet you found some things, a testimonial or I guess somebody has told you before who came into your place and said that I have something that's incurable. I don't know if you can help me out. And probably in the back of your mind already, it's like, let me be the definer of that. Right. And there is hope. Yes. And again, we have to be very careful, because, in the holistic field, Big Pharma has those big subtitles, says you can't claim anything. Yeah. So all we say is we're boosting their immune systems, and somehow their immune system fixed their own problem. Yeah. So without being too sketchy in the claims, what's your favorite testimony?
See, and I haven't even really ever thought about that. There was one that happened actually before I got into health and wellness. I was still on my little health journey. That really changed me forever. So my monster, I had Lyme's disease and some other stealth tick-borne infections that were mimicking all these autoimmune disorders, right? And I can't remember what year it was, maybe 2013, 2014. So I was working again in the fuel industry, but was still struggling all the time. And at one of my stops, there was this really beautiful young girl that used to work there. And at the time, she had a little boy, everything like that. And I'd talk to her and see how she's doing. One day I went in there and her spirit was down, gone. She didn't even look like the same person. I said, dude, what's going on? She says, well, I've been having some health issues and I just got diagnosed with MS. My neurologist confirmed everything and so I'm starting all these drugs, whatever. And knowing what I'd learned up to that point, I'm like, well, there's infections that can mimic a lot of these things. And these infections, if you go to a normal lab, about 80% of the time, they're going to be missed by this lab. And she's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, because she had this little boy, no husband, nobody helping her out with that or anything like that. And I says, you know what? This testing is $2,000 or $3,000 to get it done. Insurance isn't going to cover it because it's kind of a off the beaten path type test. But we should see if we can get you this testing done. So anyways, we set up, a GoFundMe account for her and everything like that. And
You guys helped her with that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. We kind of got a little pitch campaign going for her because I knew she couldn't afford it. She worked at a gas station, probably making minimum wage. And I was, at that point, still broke. And anyways, we got enough money for her, sent it off. And then she called me back about 2 weeks later, and she's like, I just got off the phone with the CDC. I'm like, really? What'd they have to ask you? They wanted to know where I'd been back east, where I could have contracted Lyme's disease and all these other ones. And I went, interesting. And she's like, what do you think that means? And I'm like, well, these infections are known as the great imitators because if they get in certain parts of your body, they can imitate a whole broad spectrum of autoimmune disorders. And she's like, oh, wow. So it might help with my MS. And I'm like, oh, I ain't going to say anything, but maybe you don't have MS. And so at that point, a local doctor who I'd worked with for a lot of years went, oh, wow, this is a cool story. You mind if I reach out to her and see if I can help her through this? I'm like, absolutely. So anyways, she starts seeing this doctor. They're giving her IVs, antibiotics, all these different things. And then kind of lost contact with her. I was like, oh, man, I hope something didn't go wrong, whatever. Well, I was walking down the mall one day here in St. George, and walking towards me is her and this little boy. And he's maybe 3-4 years old at that time.
Her son, right?
Her son, yeah. Yeah, she had her little boy with her. And she sees me and just gets this giant smile and comes over and gives me a big hug. And her little boy's still kind of just standing there, like looking at me, like, who's this guy? What's going on here? And she turns around and goes, hey, this is the guy that saved mommy's life. And that little boy just tears,
Yeah.
runs over, grabs me by the legs, just loving on me. And the impact that had on me, like, I don't even know how to quantify it.
Right.
That changed me that day. That went, okay, yeah, well, maybe you just got lucky with this one, right?
Right.
But you just gave somebody a gift that they can never repay you for. And you just didn't go through what you went through just to go back and work on gas pumps. Maybe you need to reevaluate your life and see where you need to be.
Right.
And so that one had a very profound impact on me. One this week that I just had happen. Gentleman came in because his heart's failing. 70-year-old guy. Had an MRI, and I'm going to make a Facebook post here pretty soon about it to show the MRI, the cardiac MRIs he's had 1 year apart. He had one in June of 2021 that showed that out of his left ventricle, he had 26% function. Out of his right, he had 23% function. So he's already in cardiac failure. It's either stage 1 or stage 2. The only thing he's done different is he's done about 35 hyperbaric sessions, not missing a day at my facility, and then he had another MRI done on his heart. Now he's got 67% function out of his right ventricle and 64% function out of his left ventricle, and it says an overproductive heart for his age. Done nothing else but hyperbaric. Crazy. So he went out of cardiac failure to his numbers are better than the average person his age now.
So is it possible, and maybe you've already thought about this, like with these amazing results, like how come, shouldn't they be doing more blindfold studies, papers on this? Because my father, for example, he told me, he's like, hey, you're talking to Dr. Bradley Nelson, who's, obviously into energy healing. Make him do some white papers on his PTSD clients. And he did for the new edition of the book with Tony Robbins. There's some documents on there. In fact, the lady who provided the records of the white papers, the blindfold studies, was a client of mine.
All right.
Yeah. She's like, hey, Dr. Brad, reach out to me. I work with veterans already. I can gather a group of them and let's do it. Don't you think we should be putting out those papers more, or if you've probably already thought about that, or do you think it's something that people just want to keep doing what you're doing without having record of it?
No, the studies are finally starting to pile up and being done.
Yeah.
And it's the Israelis who are literally leading the charge on this. The one that came out in near the end of 2021, it was the University of Israel at Tel Aviv did the study on what they call telomeres. They're part of our DNA, right? And at the end of our chromosomes, we have telomeres. And basically, every time our body reproduces cells, when we rebuild our liver, whatever,
right,
a little bit of that telomere is cut off. And it's kind of like, that time clock, right? The harder we go, the more damage we do to our cells, these telomeres, disappear quicker. And then when we get to the end of the telomere, where there's nothing else protecting the chromosome, whatever is in your DNA family line, disease-wise, when that next chop happens,
opens up.
Epigenetically, it turns it on, and whether it's cancer, autoimmune, whatever you're dealing with starts, right? So they discovered these telomeres in the 40s, and the scientists who discovered them won a Nobel Prize in medicine for it. And Big Pharma has spent more money trying to develop a drug to not only try to lengthen telomeres, but if they could just stop them from disappearing, you could literally slow down the aging process.
Right.
If you could regrow telomeres, you're turning back the biological clock.
Right.
So the study they did...
Like real anti-aging.
Really anti-aging.
Yeah, really anti-aging.
And then this is going to all tail into pre-flood, where people were living hundreds of years.
Oh, yeah.
And...
Which I do believe.
Well, I used to be in seminary going, dude, there's no way. The calendars were screwed up. There's no way this was happening,
Yeah.
da-da-da-da. But
Yeah.
anyway, so they took 60 elderly people. They didn't screen them out for anything. They might have had cancer. They could have been completely healthy. And they ran them through a barrage of hyperbaric treatments. But they measured their telomere lengths before and after these hyperbaric sessions. And not only did they stop the breakdown of telomeres, so you're basically halting aging at that point, but on average, they grew 23% length on their telomeres. And so the world just went, wait, what? Like, what just happened there? Well, at the end of the study, these 60-plus-year-old people were now aging like they were in their mid-40s. That's what it meant.
It's amazing.
Now they're in their second phase of that study. But now let's jump back to pre-flood days in the Bible, right? Where people were living 500, 600, 700 years.
Right.
Well, once this study came out, all these evolutionary biologists went, oh my God, maybe what was being talked about in the Bible before the flood, maybe people were living that long, because we know from ice cores, trees, things like that, not only was the oxygen content up to about 40% on the planet, double what we have now.
Double what we have now, yeah.
But the atmosphere was 3 to 4 times thicker, so there would have been more pressure.
And I also believe, too, there were less chemtrails in the air. And
odds are glyphosate wasn't being sprayed on everything we ate at that point, too.
Yeah, and I think there's more and more studies showing that what the soil used to be hundreds of years ago is not what it is now. So we're getting 1/1000th of the nutrients that we should be getting from the ground. They probably had way fuller when you ate an apple, you got all the nutrients from it. Now you get nothing.
There's no
You're eating
nutrients
air
in it. Yeah, but from those studies, they went, oh, well, these people were living in a giant hyperbaric chamber. Maybe they were living to 500, 600 years old.
It's a crazy way to look at it.
Yeah,
they were living in a hyperbaric
you
chamber.
had more oxygen present, right?
Right.
Plus,
pressure.
you had 3 times the amount of pressure that we have now.
Right.
That's like 1.4 atmospheric pressures, which my chambers go up to right about that level. It's like they were living in a giant hyperbaric chamber. So now that we know how it can lengthen telomeres, maybe they were living that.
I was waiting for a moment for the mind to be blown, and now it has been blown.
Oh, dude. After that study came out, I got more calls from super highly intelligent people from all over the country.
Right.
Because they read the study.
Right.
And they wanted more information going, is this really real?
Right.
Because with hyperbarics, we had this equation, right? We know you release up to 8 times more stem cells when you're in a hyperbaric environment than you normally do.
Right.
We know there's tissue oxygenation, hyperoxygenation of the entire body. But people were healing a lot faster than they still should based on those few things we had in that equation. But now that we have this telomere study, that's the missing part of the equation. Now that when we put everything together, it all makes perfect sense.
quick question, not sidestepping. How young can you be to do hyperbaric? Is there kind of a time that's like safer? Because like for example, even with like nootropics that like I'm a big fan of, you can't take something for an adult that you would put for a child,
right?
Because, so same thing with hyperbaric. Is there a certain age that's like safe from then on to do it, or is it any age, or how does that work?
So it's as early as you can get a child to clear their ears. Because as you go up in pressure, you've got to equalize the ears, right?
Oh, right,
Most of the time when we have kids that are 4 or 5 months old dealing with whatever they're dealing with, as long as they can suck on their pacifier, their binky, and get their ears to clear,
right?
they love it.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, so we had twins recently. It was about a year ago from locally here. They were both born with spinal meningitis. They almost both died. The one had hydrocephaly, where his head, because of the swelling of the brain, had grown so big. They were not even 3 months old. We took a hyperbaric chamber to their home. The one kid was completely blind. Now, a year and a half later, the kid's got his complete vision back, and they're starting to catch up to their peers.
It's amazing.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
But
so just a lot of inflammation in the brain.
Inflammation in the brain. Yeah.
Right.
Well, it starts in the infection in the central nervous system. They don't know how they got it really,
right.
But it almost killed them both. And now those kids are different.
So it's interesting also too with going back to the age thing. In the body code, it's called bioage, which you probably heard of that before. So every part of your body has a bioage. The liver, you could be 72 years old bioage, but you're 43. But if I work on it energetically and remove toxins and emotional baggage, you can get it down to like 23. Now you have a 23-year-old liver. But the fact that the hyperbaric, what I love about the hyperbaric is that it's so like you just step in and you just relax. Now I did see somebody step in once and they had their cell phone in there, whatever. I'm like, you've probably thought about this. What's going on with the dirty electricity, EMF? Like probably that person's cell phone or laptop did not have a sticker that blocks it, or what's going on in that there's no sort of magnetic field energy that's toxic in there? Is there something that kind of prevents that?
If they want to take in their electronic devices, okay,
can't
fine.
stop them. Yeah.
Right, yeah. I mean, because if we just want them to be comfortable and relaxed in there, and that extra hour of EMF exposure isn't going to affect them much because they're getting it all day long. That's kind of the way I would look at it. But if somebody comes to me and they say, what can I do to get my most valuable experience from this hyperbaric chamber?
Yep.
Well, turn that phone off. Once you get up to pressure, start a little Wim Hof breathing. Let's even kick that parasympathetic into overdrive. And if you can meditate, do it. If not, let me give you this Oculus device we have. We have an Oculus that we put on people, especially if they're so scared of being in there, in a tight, confined place.
Virtual reality headset?
Virtual reality headset, because we have a guided meditation
great.
app on there. So,
fantastic.
Do you like being on the beach? Do you like being on top of the mountain? Do you like being in the redwood forest? Here, let me put you there. And it's, once you have it on, you're fully immersed, right? Like you can hear the gulls, you can hear the waves.
That's awesome.
Everything's around you. And then after about 10 minutes, this lady's voice comes on. The hyperbarics is already shifting the nervous systems to put you right at that meditative state. And then that lady starts talking and people are gone.
Right. And I was curious too with, you've heard of PTSD, but you've also heard of CPTSD.
Yep.
Does it also help people out with CPTSD?
Oh, yeah.
What about like hormonal imbalances?
Yeah. So the thing is anytime a human being, and you probably know this very well, is stuck in sympathetic overdrive, which I don't know what the number is, but it's probably really high.
Yeah.
I mean, just having a cell phone, the dopamine hits you're constantly getting by flipping through Facebook or buying things or whatever, dopamine dumps all day long. So you're pegged out sympathetic wise, right? Yep. I mean, you are burning your candle at both ends. You get in that hyperbaric chamber, and I don't really care what you're doing in there. Right. Those nervous systems are going to shift, and it's going to rip you out of that sympathetic overdrive. Right. And put you in a place where you go, like most people, they'll set their phone down and you'll just see them staring off into la la land. Like,
it's great.
Is this the first quiet time you've had in your life in a very long time? If so, by all means, take advantage.
You also said that there's 2 times that people have this form of experience similar to the hyperbaric, giving birth. The other one was meditation.
Yes.
Now, there's I'm trying to remember what trans something. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I heard it's a very deep meditation. I know Seinfeld.
Is it a modality that they use?
Yeah. I'm just wondering, like, what form of meditation do you recommend people? Because here's the thing. What I always tell people with clients, I always say, here are some things you can do for yourself. For example, I just reset your solar plexus, chakra. Here's some crystals that could do it. And here's a meditation that could do it.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, like, what would be a semi-fabricated meditation that can give you the same experience as a hyperbaric, like that feeling, just to kind of maintain before, let's say, maybe you want to do it on a weekly basis,
right?
But you want to also maintain yourself between Monday through Friday.
Right.
What meditation do you see that people lean towards because no one's going to give birth every week? So.
Right. Yeah. We just can't have a child every week to make sure we get that oxytocin dump and go where we want to go. It really depends on, what they come in and what they're after for. So where the hyperbarics is so unbelievably powerful, especially when you tie in the virtual reality stuff with them, is the trauma patients, right? So most of them have never been able to get into a meditative state, no matter how hard they try, because they're so pegged out in that sympathetic overdrive, right? Like fight or flight is their new way of life. Mm-hmm. And so you tell somebody that's got, really advanced trauma, hey, you just need to calm down and meditate, and they're just going,
they can't do that.
What does that mean? Well, you don't have to do anything inside that hyperbaric chamber. It's going to shift those nervous systems for you. Yeah. I have a local psychologists and psychiatrists that when they get somebody that they've done EMDR, all these other things are, and we can't get a breakthrough, go see Ryan over there. Let him throw you in a hyperbaric chamber, see if it helps.
Right.
And then once they get in there, since we know they're trauma patients, they're going to go in with the Oculus, and we already have that Oculus programmed. I mean, there's probably 20 different types of guided meditations it could do. We always do it on trauma. Let the hyperbarics put them in that place, and then let them handle the rest from there.
That's awesome. And they're called dives, right? Dives?
Yeah, that's what they refer to them as.
Yeah, so the dives, do you what's the contingency upon, like, how much time do you recommend, or is it the same dive like duration for everybody?
So what we do is we start out at 60 minutes. And then we slowly work people up to 90 minutes.
Wow.
And why 90 minutes is so important, we kind of call it the Goldilocks zone, because the studies that they've done on circulating stem cells, you see a giant uptick of circulating stem cells from the 45-minute mark to the 90-minute mark. And then it's almost like somebody turns the faucet off at that point. So for getting the best results we can, we want to keep them in that Goldilocks zone as long as we can. And if they're not trying to heal up a wound, that won't heal or something that way, once you hit that 90-minute mark, that's kind of, you've got as much as you can today out of it. Let's get you out, and then we'll bring you back the next day and put you right in that same place again.
So it would be, let's say the weekend would be somebody brand new, probably their first weekend, they'd probably do 2 60-minute dives Friday and Saturday.
We do 3 sessions at 60 minutes.
3 sessions.
We do 3 sessions at 75 minutes, and then we keep them at 90 minutes through the rest of their duration.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to know, just because I want people, the listeners, to listen in and be like, okay, this is what I could expect, if I were to do this, and like I said, it seems like it's an experience. Like, it's, first of all, I would love to go into a place where they treat you like a human being, they appreciate your soul. I wouldn't mind an Oculus on my head and someone to throw my cell phone into the oblivion, because the cell phone is, I was wondering, like, how do I get to a business where I can throw my cell phone into the ocean? Like, I was like, literally, I admire the life of Christopher Nolan, who doesn't have a cell phone.
Right.
It's like you could contact his assistant, and then the assistant will say, hey, someone's trying to reach you. Right. That sounds like a good life to me. But we have to get out there, though. See, so it's kind of a conundrum. It's like the only reason why you wouldn't have a cell phone is because you're agoraphobic and maybe you don't want to communicate with anybody. But if you want to create impact in the world, even though agoraphobia does cause impact to other people, and when they know that you have that, it could impact them in a negative way. Like, that's sad. Right. But you need to reach out to people. But I think the problem is we weren't taught in 5th grade, this is what balance looks like.
Right.
We were talking about how to get the career, but then if we were to get a snapshot of a career, we wouldn't see balance. We would see somebody who's teetering on stress and whatever, and they weren't taught the basics of like, this is how you maintain a healthy body.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm reading a new book right now called Dopamine Nation. And
I saw your post on that.
Oh my gosh. Dude. So the whole premise behind that book, and the lady that wrote it, she's got a PhD. She's at Stanford right now, I think. And she said something very, very profound in this chapter that I was just listening to. She says that this upcoming generation are all hedonists, and I'm like, wait. And I had to pause it, and I had to sit there and think about it, right? Because hedonism is basically the pursuit of the ultimate pleasures all the time, and nothing is more important than pleasure for you if you're a hedonist.
Right.
Like, you don't want anything to do with pain, But the only way to find balance that she keeps talking about in this dopamine-driven world that we live in is, yeah, dopamine's okay. It's good. It can help drive us. It can help do these things. But the only way to keep a medium balance where you don't burn out your dopamine system is you have to have pain on the other side of it. And she's like, this generation, the first time they ever feel any pain, here's some Tylenol. Here's some ibuprofen. Oh, honey, it's cold outside. You don't have to go to school. You're going to catch a cold. We've basically been babying this generation into never feeling the pain where all of our growth comes from. How often do we ever really grow when we're always in a state of feeling good? Hardly ever.
You don't.
Right?
Yeah.
It's those times where your back's up against the wall, you're hurting, you're miserable. That's when you find growth. And when she started talking about this is the hedonist generation, dude, it blew my mind because
it's a bold statement. Because that's not how I would look at. That's not how I would look at the generation.
Right.
But it does make sense if we're almost in a way thrill seekers in our own way. Like, you know, and I think the reality is that I've always said that our world has an identity crisis.
Right.
And I think the reason why we see what we see in the news, why we see everything, is because we really forget, like, no one has sat us down and be like, do you know who you really are? Like,
right.
Do you know what machine you've been given?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, like, your spiritual lineage? And because of that lack of identity, we react, we react like as if we had none.
Yeah.
And we seek materialistic things that we think that's going to bring us our identity, but it's not. No. You know, it's like we should probably have meditated in a hyperbaric about who we really are in the beginning when we were children,
right? And
then in the future manifest whatever from that foundation,
whatever we want. Yeah. And my son was sitting there with me when I was listening to this, and when I paused it, he was looking at me all, as I was trying to soak it all in, and he's like, "What does that mean?" I'm like, "Well, let me put it in a way you can understand it," because he's 16 years old, wants to be this big football star. He's been working his butt off to get there. But I said, let's think about this as everybody gets a trophy, right? Like when I was going through sports and athletics, I grew up in a small town, so you played everything. You played football, basketball, baseball, wrestling, you ran track. Were there times where I went out and pushed myself to get better when I won? No. When I got my butt blown off the, basketball floor by 30 points, that's when I went home, changed the way I was preparing myself, put in the work so things like that didn't ever happen again.
Right.
But now at this generation where everybody gets a trophy, where does that motivation come from?
It goes away.
Right. Yeah. So, I didn't mean to get sidetracked I just read that in that book and it was it hit me upside the head because it's always been there, and we sat and watched it happen. But again, through those hardships, that's when we become better.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I feel like my mother, when you're 9 years old, she already knew that she was kind of like helping out her cousins with like pain and things like that. And she's like, oh, you have a, owie, you have a yaya, I'm going to take care of her. She was just young. And they kept programming to her, hey, you're going to be a doctor one day. You're going to be a doctor one day. And then in that Peruvian school, it's different from America, where like undecided in college is like really unknown, like that, like in Peru. In Peru, it's like they've already been grooming you since you were like 9 or 10, like what classes you need to take to get to a certain career. So I just find it like there's certain cultures that we can grasp information that just works. It's like, hey, this is a great way to raise your kid. Oh, when you're pregnant, try not to be so stressed because your baby absorbs emotions. Or hey, when you instead of seek through them, why don't you use hyperbaric? It's like we just need to gather all that wisdom in and bring it in and just be like, and that's why I started this podcast, because my mother passed away in 2011 by pancreatic cancer. Oh. Yeah. And I was her caretaker for like a year. It was very traumatizing. And so it was Healing the Healer is really about some of the greatest healers don't take care of themselves. Right. But they run on a sort of a savior kind of mission where they're like, I'm going to save everyone, but they don't save themselves, Yeah. And so I made this because I'm like, we have to provide more information. Hyperbaric. You've probably blown a few minds, thousands of minds out there that are just like, whoa, I never even tried that. Why don't I try that? Or maybe I heard about this, but I never actually attempted to use it. Right. And maybe this will open up their mind to do it, because we need multiple tools in this world. I don't think we have, honestly, when I'm driving my kids, I'm like, see those clouds up there? Yeah, that they're trying to basically make this place toxic for our air. And that's why you probably have allergies here, And they're like, no, now. It's like, I don't want my kid to be blind, to be like, I'm going into a world that's like, everything is like this beautiful flower. It's like, no, there's thorns here, there's thorns there. Our water's not clean. There's fluoride in it. Like, you got to know like your environment, right? And then through that, now when you're not ignorant anymore, what tools can we use to assist ourselves that maybe people don't talk about?
Yeah. How old was your mother when she passed?
She was 64.
64. Okay, so she's kind of from that same generation. Like, so my mom right now, she is 63. So your mother about 10 years older. But
how old are you, by the way?
I am 43.
I'm 40. Okay.
So we're
kind of okay.
Yeah, but I remember when I was young, and everything we went to the doctor for, my mom, they know what they're doing. Shut up and listen.
That's right. Yeah.
Where my mom is now, she hears doctors talk about things, and she goes, let's dissect what they said.
Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah, that
very
paradigm
different.
Shift
Huge
has happened.
Paradigm
we used
shift,
to put them up on this giant pedestal, but now because of all the hardship that generation went through,
exactly.
Not all of them are that way. My mom's very open-minded. She's a brilliant woman, but she starts going, okay, they said this to you in this doctor's appointment. Let's research that out. Let's see if that's really where things are at. And I'm glad that's happening.
Yeah, and I think too, because the one thing about the information age, I'm hoping we shift more towards the intuition age. But we're in the information.
I like that.
Yeah, so we're in the information age. It's gotten us so far, but we're still killing ourselves, and that's why I feel like the intuition age will bring us more heart-centered lives. Right. But what's interesting is that it's brought us to the point where we are learning of how systems are faulty. Yes. I think more than ever. So you're a doctor. How are you trained to give us something? I'm trying to remember the book. I'm reading the book Lost Connections, and it's really good because it talks about depression and anxiety and kind of like the history of like what are psychologists and big pharma and how they play a role in it. And I didn't know about this, but the very small clinical trials that work for them, they chose those trials. They're a lot. The ones that didn't do well, they don't choose those. They just kind of like put them in like okay.
That one never happened.
That one never happened.
Just push it off
but
the table.
This one did. So
this one showed what we wanted it to show.
Yeah, and exactly.
So that's the one we're going to publish.
And that's enough for the clinical trials is the one that worked. But everything else, that's 97% where it didn't work with those clients, we're not going to even publish that.
Yeah. So this person didn't get the same results. Let's run a battery of tests on him to see if we can find something that we can exclude him from these numbers for.
Right.
And they do that to enough people, then they get the results exactly that they want.
Yeah. See, so if we kind of know where the history of like, what is my father supposed to say to as an oncologist to a patient because he was trained to say that. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, you can hate all doctors you want, but would you really hate on a doctor that's all he knew? That's right. So he's just trained to do what he does, and this is how he makes his living. Yeah. So do you want to take his living away from him? You probably don't. So, but then you look at him as he's just an opinion. opinion,
Right.
and then you find other opinions, and then you make your own decision.
Yeah, here's a highly intelligent person.
Yep.
This is what their opinion on the situation is.
Right.
There's a lot of other really highly intelligent people that I should probably talk to about this as well.
And I'm glad that we're kind of opening up into that. And like I said, the reason why also the intuition age is very important is that I believe the creator gave us something where we can use our intuition, and something tells you in your gut, like, I feel like this is the right way, and there's people that I've had people say, like, the doctor told me this, and for something deep down inside me said, that doesn't sound right. And I would tell my clients, I'm like, don't ever quiet that voice. Just listen to it, and then that will always lead you the right way, but yeah, I'm glad that we both, think the same way on that. I know we want to wrap this up, but I've learned so much from you, and I'm grateful for all the knowledge and everything that you've added to this podcast. So I just want to kind of end this real quick and just say, if someone wanted to make sort of a radical change in their life, and I know you mentioned that people can purchase your hyperbaric, is it kind of 50-50 on that? Are a lot of people purchasing their own hyperbaric, or there are more customers that just want to use your systems and then kind of go their way? Like, what's the percentage on that? I'm just curious.
I have to kind of look at our rental market that we have. So I have rental chambers all over the country too. So if you don't want to outright buy one, you don't want to go, to my facility or some other facility, we have rentals, right? Well, about 80% of my rentals never come back. So I'll have somebody that rents a chamber, say they've got horrible rheumatoid arthritis, right?
Right.
Hyperbarics is the best anti-inflammatory in the world, the way it works. It actually turns off the pro-inflammatory cytokines, or these little signaling molecules that tell your body to produce inflammation.
Right.
Hyperbarics goes and turns that off. Well, they'll get those results that they want for their rheumatoid arthritis, but then they start to notice, oh my gosh, I'm down 12 pounds. I get home from work and I just don't eat and then lay on the couch and go to bed. I'm up cleaning my house.
You have energy.
Yeah. I mean, because the first part of the Krebs cycle to produce energy is oxygen, right?
Right.
And so what happens most of the time, they have their rental for 1, 2, 3 months, sometimes longer. And then when it's time to send it back, they stop and they think and go, well, yeah, that main thing's better, but look how much better my quality of life is. And then 8 out of 10 times we get that phone call, hey, I've been renting for a while. How much if I just keep this?
That makes a lot of sense. They have to try it out for themselves, and then they see multiple changes, more than they expected, and then they buy it. So that makes a lot of sense. Did you want to maybe share how can people get a hold of you? How can what's your website? What's the best way if they want to reach out to you? How can they get a hold of you?
Just on the web at InsideoutHyperbarics.com. We've got a lot of information on there, some of our testimonials, things like that. You can reach out to us via email that way. And giving out phone numbers really anymore isn't kind of a thing, Nobody ever remembers a phone number, but yeah, I mean, we've got a Facebook page, of course, Instagram, all that other stuff. But yeah, if you got any questions or anything about hyperbarics, just shoot us an email right there on our website, and within a day, we'll get back to you.
That sounds great. I appreciate your time. I always end the podcast saying these words here. The world has a false notion where I'll take care of you if you take care of me. But if we just take care of ourselves, then we can change our home, we can change our relationships, we can change the city, and we can eventually change the world. So grateful for you being here.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. It was an honor.
Yeah, and so and then hopefully we'll I said, like, I would love to have people come visit your place over there and receive your treatments. I mean, the testimonials are incredible. It's self-evident, and so just grateful for all the work that you're doing here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.